So first off, I kind of wanted to start by just going over again. I know I already made a little bite-sized snippet on how to get Fedora um, into VMware, but I know that it's kind of like it's a lot to do all in week one. And just so you know, that is the main focus of week one. It's just getting comfortable, just getting set up. So that's what we're going to kind of cover just a little bit here at the beginning, and then we'll actually dive into lab one. And technically this is all part of lab one, but I kind of want to just show you how to get set up again, just so it's all clear and cut for those who haven't attempted yet. So as I talked about in the weekly announcement and in the other video, if you haven't seen it, there's two big downloads. Well, one big download, but two main downloads you're going to need. The first is the Fedora image. And I've had students that say, I'm not really familiar with these terms. So if you are, bear with me because I'm going to explain it for those who aren't. Fedora is a Linux-based operating system. And if you don't know Linux, it's just like Windows. It's just like Mac. In fact, what you're seeing here on my screen, I actually run Linux full-time on my computer. And you're going to be doing the same thing just inside of a virtual machine. A virtual machine is just us running a computer inside of your actual computer. So, for example, if you're running Windows, we can run Linux on just like a little window, or Mac even. So we're just going to run a computer inside of a computer, and it's really common practice in any field of computers that you do. So virtual machines is something that if you're not familiar with it, you're kind of going to want to become familiar with some of that terminology. And so this download is the Fedora image. So you're actually going to download a pre-set up instance of, basically you're downloading a computer that's already been set up for you, which is partly why it's so large. But the reason we do that is because Oracle, the actual database system, is kind of it's out of the scope of the class to set up, install, and configure. And most people don't have Linux box sitting around. So that's kind of why we give you this virtual machine, because it really makes it easy as a student to get set up. The downside is it's a very large download. If you have spotty internet, like I know for a lot of people, maybe they shut the internet off, or maybe it's really slow and disconnects. If you ever run into those issues, ask me for the torrent download. I have a torrent download, and the main big boon to the torrent download is that if your internet cuts out, you don't have to start back over from nothing. It will save your place in the download. So if you have any issues, just let me know. But traditionally, without the torrent, there's two ways to download this. You can download it from this Dropbox. And if for whatever reason you can't get it there, would prefer, you can download it from the university's FTP site. And it kind of walks you through this. And I don't want to spend too much time going through this because I actually don't have CyberDuck, which is what most people use. I actually use FileZilla. But it walks you through nice and easy. I don't think anyone's had issues actually going through this portion of it. So you'll need that file. And just so you know, you want to save that file in a permanent place. So once you download it, you want to put it somewhere where it can live permanently. So I like, underneath my home directory, I like to create a little folder called images. And I know that's reminiscent of photos, but images is like all my ISO files, and I keep all my different server disks here, my development virtual machines and stuff like that here. And so you can actually see this is my CIT225-Zip file. That's the one that I downloaded, and that's where I put it, and I extracted it here. And the reason being is once you set it up, if you move those files, it's going to kind of complain at you, say, hey, I don't know where the files are for this virtual machine anymore. It's not very smart. So you want to put it somewhere permanent. And also, if you have iCloud Sync or OneDrive or any of those weird things, you don't want to put it there either, because it can actually corrupt the files because it tries to back up while you're using it, weird things like that. Yeah, and I don't know, I think they try to give everybody access to McLaughlin's Dropbox, but I would recommend just going through the FTP site anyways, because I think you're going to have a better download experience that way anyways. So no worries, it's the same file. The SFTP is probably actually a little bit better. It'll probably download just a tad faster. All right, and so once you have that downloaded, the last thing you need is an application to run this virtual machine. And so in our case, we're going to use VMware. And VMware is just an application, and it's going to run our virtual machine. And so you can actually click down here. It says review the VMware instance documentation. And it has a couple things that you can download. You'll want to get from E5 on the hub. And if you don't have that yet, it will come, and that will give you access to E5 if you don't already. But what I would recommend, if you're on a PC, if you're running Windows, there's also Vmware Player, and that's completely free for non-commercial use, and us as education is non-commercial. So that's actually what I run, is I run Vmware Player. So when you see my examples, I'm actually running the player. But if you have access to E5 on the hub, feel free to get VMware Workstation. If you're on a Mac, you actually only have one option, and you have to get the VMware Fusion. So if you don't have access to E5 yet, use the free version for now, and then you get a key when you get the email. And you'll want to get that installed and all that and so forth. And just so you know, if you ever forget, the credentials are here in this VMware instance documentation. But anyways, once we have all that downloaded, what we're going to be with is our VMware Player. So I'm actually going to open this up, and so this is what you'll have. And I actually kind of removed all mine, so it's clean slate, just like yours might look if you're using VMware Player. And VMware Workstation, I think, is very, very similar to this. So is VMware Fusion. But what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to want to open a virtual machine. And I know it's been pointed out, I can't change this file because you can see where it says locked there. But I have put in a request. It says set up a new virtual machine. We actually don't want to set up a new one because we downloaded a pre-existing one. So we just want to open one. So you're going to click this open a virtual machine. And then you're just going to go to that permanent place where you put that file. So, you know, for me, it's under images, and then it's in that CIT225 folder, inside this VMware VM folder. And then the file you're looking for is this .vmx. It'll say VMware Virtual Machine, and that's what you want. So I'm just going to say open. And once we do that, you can see that it'll put it right there for you. Now, because I've already run mine's kind of already there. You can see that it's suspended and all that kind of stuff. But yours will be there. That might be just a black screen here, and that's great. But when you're ready, we're just going to power this on. So that's actually what I'm going to do right now. And for me, it's going to boot right up. For you, you'll have to sign in. But you just sign in using Can Get In. And if you haven't seen that little bite-sized video, it's in the week 1 announcement. Go check that out, because then you can actually see that process of me signing in if you need to see it. But the password for this computer is Can Get In, just like that. That's the password. And that'll be your password for, you know, all your stuff on here for the most part that's Linux based. All of our database stuff, the password's just student. All right, so, and I guess we'll cover this real quick. So you can see right here that this is basically just like a computer inside of a computer. Like I kind of said, you know, we have Google Chrome in here. We have a couple different applications. In this one, your little F down here, this is your application launcher. It's basically like your start button in Windows. And this is kind of where you can access all of your stuff. So for example, we have Firefox too, actually, and we have system settings, file manager. The main one that we're kind of going to be using is file manager here, because I want to point out where all of our documents lie. Pretty much we're going to live inside of this data folder. So underneath home and data, you can see that there's these different courses, and we're under CIT225 Oracle. And this is kind of going to be our home directory. This is kind of be where we're going to live. And we'll talk a little bit about this, because we're going we're going to start focusing on lab 1 here in just a minute. But I kind of just wanted to talk to you just a little bit about this Linux instance in general. So we have a terminal, which is called console. And for the most part, you can almost do everything in this course without the terminal. The only thing we're going to use the terminal for is actually connecting to our database and running the files. So if you're like, whoa, terminal showed up, I'm getting nervous, don't be so nervous. It's gonna be fine. But if you want to start dabbling with Linux just a little bit, that's great too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you how to move through this. So little shortcut, if you want to save some time, or I even do this myself, just save a few keystrokes. So if you have the folder open, so for example, we want to be here, you can right click in some of this empty space, go to where it says actions, and then you can say open a terminal here. And that will actually open your terminal to the place you're at, because location is very important when you're in a terminal, because we want to be able to see all these files, for example. So if I say ls to see what's here, you know, we can see all of our lab files. But if I go back to where we were, I see, you know, the different stuff. So the easiest way is to right click there and say, you know, open a terminal here. But if you want to start dabbling, we're in the same place here. So if I click on data, essentially what we're doing is the same thing as saying change directory, CD for short, data. And we list. And so then we can see the same folder. So then we go into 225, CD, CIT225, list. And then we see the MySQL Oracle. And then we can go into Oracle and list. We can do this all at once too if we want it. So we could say CD, data, CIT225, Oracle. And we move all the directories at once. All right. I'm not quite sure. So Jake, I got this error message. The file home student cannot be opened. It is not a normal file. It is a folder. I need some context to kind of what step you were at or that kind of thing, because I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what step you were at or what's going wrong there. So if you want to play around with the terminal, feel free to jump around if you want, or if you want to keep it simple. You know, this isn't a Linux class, so I'm not expecting you to know it. You can just right click in here and go to actions, open terminal here. So let's dive into lab 1 just a little bit. So we're going to open up this lab 1 folder, and you will actually only see this apply Oracle lab1.sql file. I wrote this for one of the videos that we just put up. So I'm actually going to, let's take a look at our instructions here. So let's go to lab 1 and we'll just kind of walk through it. And Jake, are you just I hope I'm saying your name right. Are you just double clicking on the file? It's a little odd. I've never seen that before. All right, so we kind of covered a lot of lab 1 instructions here just by getting set up. Like I said, getting set up is kind of the main focus of lab 1. So that's kind of the big thing. But after we're ready, it says refer to the apply Oracle lab 1 instructions, because we're actually going to do a couple extra things. Jackie. Okay, perfect. So yeah, Jackie, if you want, let's do this. Are you running the terminal command, or are you just using the window here? Give that just a minute. You shouldn't have to, but for now, if you want to keep up, I'll actually show you here in just a minute. I'll show you how to do the absolute path. So, because we're actually just going to connect to Oracle here in just a minute. So I'll show you how to do it all from the terminal, because the nice thing is the terminal always works. And I don't know what's going on there. There must be something weird. So if you're still having issues with it after, we can go over that. All right. So what we're going to do in lab 1 is we are going to learn, and I kind of really like this, because basically what we're going to learn is we're going to learn how to run scripts from the command line, how to set environment variables, how to create a log file, how to set an Oracle bind variable. And yeah, if you have after class, I kind of always open it up, just kind of more like office hours. So if you get stuck anywhere, or there's something that you need to talk to me about, just if you want to just hang out after for just a second, that's usually when I kind of take care of a lot of that stuff. So we have all this stuff we're going to do, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about as we go. And that's, you can kind of see why I like to say, oh, I like to recommend just go with the lab, because it's got clear objectives, and I think it really matches with the reading pretty good. So what we're going to do is we are going to clean up we're going to learn how to run some scripts and do a couple things here real quick. Really basic stuff. But just as a little bit of background, databases, because if you're anything like me, I knew what a database was, but I didn't really fully grasp the concept when I actually took my first database class. So what I like to think of a database as is a collection of tables. So, we've all seen Excel spreadsheets, right? We've all seen like a spreadsheet with data in it. A database is actually just lots of Excel spreadsheets, all kind of organized together. But the nice thing is that you can create connections between the two tables, and so forth. So one example I always like to give is, and I think I actually have, let's take a look here real quick. I think I have some tables here. So yeah, so this is a nice little example that I like to always share. Why a database? Because most people are familiar with spreadsheets, and I always tell people, once you learn how to run a database, spreadsheets will actually kind of drive you a little bit bonkers, because they're just so simple, you can't do anything with them. So one example I always like to give is people and email addresses. So we live in a time where we have lots and lots of email addresses. So like myself, I have, I have actually like 2 or 3 personal emails. I have a business email. I have a work email. I have my BYU Idaho email. So, I'm already at 6 emails. So, emails are just a thing we have lots of. And if you're wanting to keep track of everybody's emails, if you do it in a spreadsheet, you have to explicitly define each email. So this is kind of my example. You can see here, Frodo Baggins. We have his first name, last name, email 1, 2, and 3. Having one email 1, 2, and 3 to me is kind of messy. But if we want to keep track of all of his emails, we either have to have, what if he has more than 3 emails? What if, and it's just kind of messy. So you can kind of see the dilemma there, because you either have to explicitly define as many as someone might have, or, but then at the cost of it's kind of messy and gross looking. So in a database, what we would do instead is we create 2 spreadsheets, right? And we create 2 tables. We have a person table, and it keeps track of the first name and last name, just like what we have here. Basically, we took this data and we cut it in half. And the only difference is we have to add a key to match on. So you can see here we have this person ID, first name, last name. And person ID is our key because we have to have, just like in your spreadsheets, you know, if you remember on the left-hand side, you have your hard-coded numbers, and in like Excel, we can't change what those are. But in databases, we can custom kind of define those. And in our case, they're just going to count up just like they would in Excel anyways. But then we also have the email table. And essentially what we've done here is we've made it so a person can have an unlimited, you know, theoretically, amount of emails, number of emails. Because what we've done is we just said, look, email, this email record is attached to person ID 1. So person ID 1 is Frodo Baggins, and he has Frodo@theshire.com, and that's one record. But then he has, you know, person ID 1, which is Frodo, has 3 records. And he could potentially have hundreds or thousands or millions of records. So, you know, think about this with like your Facebook posts or your Instagram posts. You know, they probably have a person table or similar that keeps track of your, you know, kind of personal information or your account. And then they would have like a post table, and you just keep adding to your posts. And that's essentially what we've done here. So that's kind of why I like to give this example, is because we can have an unlimited number of emails just by splitting our data just a little bit. All right, so I guess back to lab 1. So what we're going to do now that you maybe have like a little bit of, hopefully, very broad view understanding, is we are going to actually start kind of dabbling in this just a little bit. So in our database, we have these tables, and these tables, I like to think of them as structures. You'll hear me use the word structures a lot. A table by itself, because you can have an empty spreadsheet, right, without any data in it. The table itself is a structure. I like to always use the analogy of a house. And then the data, whether it has data or not is a question, but we can fill that table with data. And that's, you know, the stuff that you put in the house. So when I say structure or table, think of it like the empty shell. So when we build a table in a database, it's there permanently, because that's kind of the point of a database, right? Is we don't want it to disappear when we turn our computer off. You know, databases wouldn't be very useful if they weren't persistent with our data. So when we create something in our database, it's there until we explicitly delete it. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a cleanup script. So down here in the instructions, you can see that there's a couple scripts here. There's a cleanup script, and they all kind of make sense. That's going to erase everything in our database. It's going to completely clean it up. And that sounds terrible, right? Especially when later on down the line you've done all this work. You know, you think it might be scary to run that cleanup script, but we actually are going to run that cleanup script every time you run any one of your files. And that's because every time we run your files, it's going to delete everything and recreate it. So that way, every time you run your scripts, you're starting fresh. So we're going to clean up, and then we're going to create all of our tables. Create Oracle Store 2.SQL. And then we're going to pre-seed. Now, people always ask, oh, what's seed? What does a seed mean? I'm a farmer, so it made sense to me. But we're putting data in our table. We're planting. We're filling our stuff. We're filling our fields with data, and in this case, our tables. So basically, we have 2 scripts that fill data. One kind of puts this prerequisite data in, and the other one puts the bulk of the data in. We'll talk more about it in future weeks, so I don't want to get too crazy. Just for right now, know that we're going to run both of them. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to start building our file, because I don't want to go too long through this. So I'm actually going to just know that I'm going to pop these instructions over on my second monitor, and we are going to log in here. So, oh, you get to see the login. Can get in. I'm going to show you that password here. Can get in. We're going to unlock. All right, and I promised that I'd show you how to do this all with the terminal or with the GUI. And you'll hear me say GUI. That stands for Graphical User Interface. Someone told me last time, oh, you keep saying GUI, I don't know what that is. The GUI is buttons and folders. This is not a GUI. It is text only. So when I say GUI, know that I'm talking about pictures and icons and stuff like that. Stuff you can use your mouse to click on. All right, so we're going to go home, For those of you who want to use the little icons, the folder structure, we can do this. And we're going to go into our lab 1 folder. And if you're using the terminal, we're going to type cd space data CIT225. And if you hit tab, it'll autocomplete for you. CIT225 lab 1. Oh, and I typed something wrong. CD data. I missed Oracle, sorry. There we go. So CD data, CIT225, Oracle lab 1. There we go. And then I'm going to type ls so we can list our files and see what we got. Now, our main file that we're going to be working with is our apply Oracle lab 1 file. And this will actually be in all of your folders. So just real quick so I can show you. In lab 2, you've already got a file there. And this actually is kind of helpful because it kind of has the steps already pre-built for you in a way. So if I open up this file, you can see that. You can click on it if you're using the GUI. If you're using the command prompt, you can type kwrite apply Oracle lab1.sql. And it'll open it up for you. Now, one thing to note, if you're using the terminal, if you use kwrite to open it up like this, you can't do anything with that terminal window after. So what I'm actually going to do is say kwrite apply Oracle lab1 and then put an ampersand after so it opens it up in the background. Because then you can see that I still have this little thing here, which is going to be important here in just a minute. All right, and then once we have this file open, I guess I can close this one. I'll close this one. Now that we have this file open, you can kind of see that it's already got a lot of stuff in here. So like these scripts. And what I'm going to recommend is we're actually going to run some of these scripts straight in the command line just to kind of see what they do. So real quick, let's get signed into the database. Because what we're going to do is we're going to clean up this all of our database, because believe it or not, fresh out of the box, your tables are already there. So let's get logged in. So the way we connect to our database is we type SQL plus, SQL plus, and at this point you can either hit return or you can shortcut and give it your username and password. So I like to use the shortcut. So I do student, which is our username, a /, and then student, which is our password. Super secure, I know, right? And then you hit return, and then you should get connected to your database. Now, it's pretty common, and I can't tell you why. For some reason, depending on how your virtual machine starts, in fact, I saw the first one of the terms show up today. You may have seen it on Teams. If you get an error about shared memory doesn't exist or something like that, there's this website here, and I'm going to edit it because right now it has gedit right there, which we need to change to kwrite. But you can use this. Basically, you just got to change one file, restart your database. So nice and pretty straightforward. So if you come across that, no fret, just let me know and I can help you through it. I'm hoping to put that link in the chat there. But once we're connected to our database, you'll see that our prompt changed because we used to have this little bash $. And that $sign means we're in bash, we're in the Linux terminal. But now that we're in the database, we see this SQL terminal prompt. And that means that we're connected to Oracle and only the SQL commands will work from this point on. Just to show you how to get out of it, in case you ever get stuck, you can type exit and it'll drop you back down into your bash. And then I'm just going to hit the up arrow to run my last command and jump right back in. All right, so to run a SQL file, we are just going to, actually we're going to kind of just take and copy this in, but I kind of want to show you where it's at. So we're in lab 1 right now, but the one we're going to run is in this lib, create, precede, seed, and utility folders. And there's two ways to run a file. You can run one that's immediately in your in your directory. So when we launched SQL Plus, we were in our Lab 1 folder. So if I look at Lab 1 folder, I can see what's here. And in fact, we can just take a look real quick. These are the files that I have access to immediately. So, it's right there. If I try to access a cleanup script just by running cleanup oracle.sql, it says I can't open the file because that file isn't right here. So what we have to do is we have to give it the absolute path. We have to tell the computer where that file is. And that absolute path is actually already written out for you right here. So what I'm actually going to do just to kind of show you is I'm just going to take and copy this. And then I'm going to paste it. Now, there's two ways to paste. You can right click in here and say paste, but you'll notice that it's Control-Shift-V. So if you want to use shortcuts, you can't just do Control-V. You got to Control-Shift and V, and then it'll paste it in. Now, when I run this, you'll see that it says procedure successfully completed, and it actually just wiped out all of our tables, which is great. So if I say select a table name from user tables, you'll notice that I get no rows selected because we just deleted everything. So now let's create them. So I'm going to just take and copy this and paste this in here. And you'll notice that this one actually does a little bit more. It actually shows you what it's doing. And also, if we click inside of our Lab 1 directory, you'll notice that it changed quite a bit. We have a few more folders because it automatically created log files. So wherever you run that create script from, it's going to create these log files for all the tables it creates. Because that's just the way they wrote the code, which is kind of nice because you can troubleshoot it. But so don't freak out. They're supposed to be there. You can kind of just ignore them. So now if I run that same command to select table name from user tables, now instead of getting those rows selected, you can see that we have quite a few things. Like we have a telephone table and a street address and an address and a contact and a user table. So that actually created our tables for us, which is really nice. And so if I want to see what's in these tables, I have to run what's called a query. And you kind of see this query here where I'm selecting data from a table. So the way all of your applications work, whether it's Facebook or whatever, the way they get their data out of a database is using if they use a SQL database, which most do, they would write something similar to this because we have to have a way to pull our data out. But if you ever just want to see everything that's in a table, the most basic query is to select asterisk from table. So in this case, let's select everything from contact, which is our person table essentially. But you'll notice I get no rows selected. So the reason we get no rows selected is because we don't actually have any data in there. Another useful command is describe. And you can just type DESC for short, and let me capitalize that so I'm semantically correct. Describe contact will show us what this table is. So basically we're showing what the columns are. So essentially we have a contact ID, blah, 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 a first name, middle name, last name, these are our columns. So if you ever want to kind of see what a table is, I like to use the describe command, and I also just like to select data from it too, because that way you can see what's actually in it. So let's keep going and let's actually see what our data is. Let's fill up this table with some data. So I'm just going to take and copy this pre-seed, and this time I'm actually going to run that one plus this seeding script. I'm just going to run both of these real quick. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that same command to select everything from contact. Before this one gave us no rows selected, but now, because we actually put data in that table, it's there. Excuse me, my throat isn't used to talking for so long. And so we can actually see all the data in that table. And you'll notice that it's not filling up the rest of my terminal screen. So I'm going to say set line size to 200. Let's try that again. And there we go. So now it's looking a little bit more familiar. So now we actually can kind of see our table here, traditional to like what we might see in Excel, just, without it being all fancy. But, we can see everybody's first name. We can see their middle names if they have one, and we can see their last name. And when you see null here, that just means that they don't have a middle name and it's empty. So that's the most basic queries. You can select everything from a table. Now, let's say that we want to select only certain things. So let's say that your boss says, hey, I need everybody's first and last name. So you say, okay, I can do that. So we select only the first and last name. So I'm going to say select first name, comma, last name from contact. And then we get our first name and last name only. But let's say you give this to him and he says, hey, look, I know you're an intern, but I got to have everything sorted like alphabetically. You say, okay, understandable. So let's add just a little bit to this. We're going to say select first name, last name from contact, just like we did before, but we're going to say order by, and let's say we want to sort it by last name, first name. And now we're sorted in alphabetical last first. So you can see here Sweeney Ian and Sweeney Matthew and Sweeney Megan. They're all sorted. So first by last name, second by first name, just like you would in Excel, but to me, it's actually easier to do it this way. All right. But then let's say that he comes to you and he says, I love that last report you gave me, but I actually decided that I only need the Sweeney family. So you say, okay, no problem. The only thing we're going to do different this time is we're going to say where and before the order by. So I guess let's do this so we don't get confused, because we're kind of building this as we go. So we say where last name is equal to Sweeney. And then we kind of filter out the last ones. And let's say we only wanted Ian. We can kind of stack these. So where last name is equal to Sweeney and first name is equal to Ian. And then we only get the one row. So you can kind of see how you can build these queries to get the data you need, similar to, just like if you're looking for data in an Excel spreadsheet. And, and that's kind of just extra so you can kind of understand the beginning of select statements, because I kind of want to introduce you, because next week, that's all we're going to cover. So that's real basic. So let's go back to our instructions, actually. Let's take a look at our instructions. So we ran these, and the nice thing is Lab 1, like I said, it's all about getting set up. It says to run these scripts. They're actually already there. So just by, I like to run them to show what they do and see what they do. And it says that it runs the following, it creates 3 logs files, and there's our scripts. All right. So the script sets a session level variable. So let's take a look at our file. So these are our session level variables. And what this does is it sets some environment variables. So like how let's actually run the same, let's run select everybody from contact. And these are kind of like system settings is what I like to think of these as. Select everything from contact. Like for example, you'll notice that the middle name says null. And really you don't need to worry about these too much. I just want you to know what they are, so when you see them, you're not like, whoa, like what are these doing? So this null, you can see where it says set null to that. Well, watch, I'm going to change this to G. Willikers. Right, so let's, I'm I'm actually just going to run this file all by itself. So I'm going to just run that file, and then let's rerun our command here. And now you'll notice that all those nulls now became gwillikers, which obviously isn't very helpful, but just to prove a point that all it's doing is changing a setting. And I actually like mine just to be set to empty. So that's what I'm gonna do that. But you can leave yours default. That's just personal preference, and that's why it's there, so you can actually just change some system settings. So when you see those, you don't need to know exactly what they do. Just know that they're changing some system settings for you. All right, and now we're going to kind of get into the juice that's actually going to be what you see from week to week. So probably the most important part of this is creating your log file. So that way you can troubleshoot as you go, which we'll talk about. So you'll see right here where, and luckily they're commented. To make a comment in your SQL script, you do this --. And I would highly recommend you comment your code, as much as you can. But we open the log file for writing. All right, so let's just run a test real quick just to kind of demonstrate what this does. So if I say spool, and then you kind of just give it the name of the file. So I'm going to say spool first week demo.txt. I'm just going to type that, and now we created a log file. We're writing to a log file, and then I'm just going to run select hello everyone from Dual. And then, so, that all should be logged. And then when we're all done logging, I'm going to say spool off. Now, if I take a look inside of my files here, let's see, what did we call that again? We called it first week demo. Oh, right here. So here's our file. Let's take a look and see what's in here. And you can see that everything I did is logged up until the end of the spool off. So that's essentially what all these .txt's are doing. And inside of your lab one, we're just creating a log file for apply Oracle lab1.txt. And you can name this whatever you want. So I know a lot of students that just to save on having so many stuff, because a lot of times when you're running this, you want to use the autocomplete. So they'll actually call this lab1 underscore log.txt. You can kind of name this whatever you want. I actually prefer to have it like this, and I'll show you why here in just a minute. So I like to change the name of that log file. Okay, and that creates our log file, and then close the log file as spool off. If you don't close the log file, it's going to keep putting everything you do out to that log file. Makes for big, long log files. All right, and so the next thing we're going to do is, and this is just kind of to introduce you a little bit, to kind of show you what's going on here. So this, you'll see where it says variable, and basically we're creating a variable, and we call this bind variable, which I think is just a little bit confusing. So I'm actually going to change the name of this to message, and you don't have to do this. Technically, the lab ones are all ready for you to run, but I kind of just want to show you this just so you know. And this variable is just like any variable in math or whatever. We're just going to store this string, lab1 is complete, inside a variable called message. So we say, okay, I want a variable called message, and it is a varchar2, which is a string, and it can have 30 characters, which is our data type. If you're familiar with any programming languages, besides some of the newer ones, we have to specify what kind of data we store in here. Is it a number? Is it text? Is it a file? What is it? So in this case, it's a string that can be 30 characters long. And then what we do is we say, oh, the message is going to store the string, lab1 is complete, and then we're just going to print it out. So I'm actually going to just run this in the terminal here. And I like to do that. What did I do here? I like to just run stuff in the terminal just to kind of demo what they actually do. And then let's set this variable. And you'll see that it's completed successfully. And then now we can use that variable wherever we want. So in a select statement, lab 1 is complete. And in fact, we can actually do something like this. We can say select last name, comma, and then the message from contact. And you can see we can actually use this stuff in our stuff. And the real reason why this is important, because later on you might see something where instead of creating a variable message, let's say we create a variable called last name. Let's create a variable called last name. And we're going to say, we're just going to call it Sweeney. That's what we're going to give it. All right, so let's create our variable. And assign it, because we have to actually say what it is. And now what I can do is I can say select everything from contact where last name is equal to our bind variable last name. And we get Sweeney's. So, you know, just when you see those, know that they're just variables where we can use a value over and over and over. All right, and then we talked about the log file, we close it off. So that's what the lab 1 script is doing by default. And I'm going to real quick change this back so it's not confusing. Bind variable, because I don't want to confuse you. How are we doing on time? Let's see. It is 6. Okay, we have just a little bit left, so I'll try to. We're about there anyways. All right, so that's what the script does. And you actually don't have to do anything that I did. It's not part of the lab. I just kind of want you to kind of see how it works and understand it. And that's basically, and I'm kind of showing you this because that's essentially what it's trying to tell you here. You know, because it basically is going through this. All right, so the one thing that you need to add to this, and this is the most important part. So before you submit your lab, what you need to do is you just need to add this query to the file. So I'm actually going to just take and copy this, and we're going to come over here and just put it in here. So I'm actually going to put it before the lab 1 is complete. In fact, I need to change this. So we set our variable there. So I'm actually going to put this right here. I'm going to format this just a little bit. You'll come to find that I'm a little OCD about how I format my my SQL statements. But that's fine. We all have our. All right, so basically what we're doing is we're selecting the table name from user tables, where they, you know, we're filtering out a lot of the system tables. So I'm just going to take and copy that. I'm just going to run that right in here real quick. And so that's what that's actually going to output. So now that we have that all in there, we have our .SQL script. And just to show you, you know, we've been running all these manually, but really what you're going to want to do is actually run the script, because you don't want to sit there and copy and paste back and forth. I kind of just did that to show you how you can run the commands. But we want to kind of, you know, we have these all in a file. Let's just run all the way through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the @ symbol, and then we're just going to type in the name of our script, because we're right there. So apply Oracle lab1.sql. And it's actually going to run through everything for us. So you can see here that it went all the way through. It deleted everything. and so on and so forth, and ran. So the numbers on the left here, it shows you lines. So good question. So like if I say select last name from contact, you can see how it went 2, 3. That's just showing your line numbers. So you can actually see, so for example, if I was helping you troubleshoot something, I could say, oh, on line 5. So it's just the line number. If you ever get stuck to where it's doing something like that, it's you're just missing a semicolon. So if you ever get stuck to where it's not showing you the SQL prompt, just type a quick like that, and it'll finish it off for you, I guess I should say. All right, so we ran our apply Oracle lab1.sql. And just to show you how to do that again, we're going to just type at apply Oracle lab1.sql, and it's going to run our script. And you'll notice that it deletes everything and recreates it because we have those scripts up there. All right, so we did that. It all works. We get 10 rows selected on our table names. And then if we go take a look in our files, you'll see that we have our apply, or we changed the name. I changed the name to lab1_log.txt. Now, before you submit a file, what I like to do is I actually like to open up this, hit Control F, and search for error and see if there's any errors. You know, because that's what's kind of nice, because there will be scripts later on that we run that are going to get kind of lengthy. And so it's nice just to be able to search for any errors in your log file. And since I don't have any, then I'm all ready to submit. And what you'll submit is your .sql file. So you'll always, each week, what you'll submit is your apply Oracle lab.sql file and your log file. So in this case, my lab1_log file. You want to make sure that it's the right log file, because I have you submit your .sql file so I can test if you need help or if there's something wrong. But really what I'm going to grade is your log file, because what I'll do is I'll come in here. And so like if I was going to grade this one of mine, I'd say, okay, yep, he has all that. And the big one for lab one is I just want to make sure you're connected, which obviously you are here. But I just want to make sure that you have all your tables created. Because next week we're going to start selecting from them. So I want to make sure you have all your tables created. And obviously beyond that. So I grade the log files from week to week because that's how I actually see what's happening in your database. So that's what you'll want to submit is your 2 files. So if I was going to submit, I'd open up Chrome or Firefox. You know, you can do it right here. You can log into Canvas. You know, you can log in and submit right through the browser here, or you can you know, what I like to recommend is I actually say, you know, if it were me, I use Google Drive. So I would actually just log into my Google Drive, create a CIT225 folder, and I would just put my whole lab 1 right in there. You know, I just take lab 1 and put it right in my Google Drive. So that way it's backed up. And then on my regular computer, you know, I'd come over here to Canvas, pull it off my Google Drive and upload it here. Because if, you know, heaven forbid anything happen, but if for whatever reason your virtual machine gets corrupt and you have to reset up, the only thing you don't want to lose is your data folder here. Specifically, you don't want to lose your SQL files because that's where all your work's going to be. We can always recreate the database as long as you have those SQL files. So I would recommend backing those up. Does anyone have any questions about what to submit? In fact, you know what? I'm going to actually, let's get rid of all this extra gobbledygook so I can show you exactly what you need to submit. And did I already do? Nope, there it is. Okay. I could do this a lot easier, but we're just going to do it the old manual way real quick. And you don't have to do this. You can, I'm just wanting to clean it up so I can show you exactly what you should submit. Oops. There we go. So what you'll actually want to submit is your apply Oracle lab1.sql file and whatever you named your log file. So in my case, I actually called mine lab1_log. But whatever you have here is what's going to print here. By default, it's apply Oracle lab1.txt. But you just want to make sure you have that and your lab log file, not the table log files or anything like that. You actually want your lab log file. Does that make sense to everybody? If that makes sense to you, let me know. I want to make sure it makes sense to somebody at least.
It makes sense.
Perfect. All right, and that's it. That's it for week 1. It's a nice, easy lab. Like I said, if you're already up and running and you connected to Oracle, this lab's going to be easy because all you have to do is add that one script here, and it's just to make sure that you're all set up and going. Lab 1 is just get set up and going. One thing I would recommend though, if you're done early and feel like that just wasn't enough, I would highly recommend reading about select statements because that's what we're going to do next week. And in fact, if you want to start just playing around, you can try to select, the first name and last name from contact, because now that you have it here, you can do that. So, select first name, just kind of like we were doing, first name, last name from contact. And you can do that kind of stuff. Also, just for very basic database stuff, W3 Schools has actually really good resources on SQL because SQL's used a lot in web development. So if you ever need so I actually am going to kind of point you here just a little bit, but come here and take a look at this select statement. There's lots of good resources out there on the web. Take a look. And you actually have a whole database now that you can kind of play in. So if you want to take a look, try it out, because we're going to be spending the next couple of weeks just focusing on pulling data back out of our database. So that's kind of where we're headed next if you want to get a leg up. But that's all for Lab 1. So unless someone has any questions, I'm going to leave it open for questions. And if there's no questions, then I'm going to end the recording and we will kind of dive into helping anyone who has any issues that need help. So any questions?
Yeah, I got a question, Brother Crook. Have you ever come across, I'm trying to just run the Fedora image, but it gives me an error saying the Intel VT-X is disabled.
Okay, yep, and I'm actually surprised this hasn't come up earlier. If you get something along the lines of VTX or you got to enable virtualization, what you have to do is you actually have to boot into your computer BIOS, which sounds crazy. It's not too bad. You may have already done it before, but if you, it's like if you have, what kind of computer do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
I have a HP laptop. It's a Windows operating system.
Do you know what model?
Yeah, it's an HP Omen. Yeah.
So yeah, perfect. So if you just Google it, most of the time you can find a pretty good resource on it. So what you need to do, and a lot of the BIOS will look like this. So you just have to, so for example, press the power button to turn it on and tap the escape key to invoke the startup menu, and then press F10 to invoke the BIOS. Basically, you just go into the menu, and where it says virtualization, you just enable it, and then you should be all good.
Okay. Well, I'll do that.
Yep, no problem. It'll require a restart, but yeah, it should be pretty straightforward. And then I also just got a chat that says on Mac. If you're on a Mac and you get you're going to open up VMware Fusion, and you get an error that says could not open dev vmon or something about a broken pipe, I'll be honest, I used to be a huge Mac fan, and I hate them now because of all the changes they're doing. So it's actually an issue with the little security built into Mac. And you have to go into, so let's see, VMware Fusion broken pipe. I want to try and show you a screenshot. You have to go into your settings and privacy. Let's see. Yeah, preferences, security, and privacy, and click through all of those little tabs. When you open it up, let's see if I can find a picture. Mac OS security and privacy. Let's see if we can find an image. Yeah, so right here, what I would do is go through, click all these, and anywhere that it says VMware in there, just enable it. And once you do that, you'll have to restart your computer. And I believe that it's under accessibility and maybe full disk access, but maybe check all of them. Once you do that, restart your whole computer, and then it should work. If you're on Mac and you get that weird thing, it comes up all the time. In fact, at work, it did the same thing. So if you come across that, that's pretty common. You can do that. I also got another chat from Ruben. He says, are we going to keep using CyberDuck? Is it just used for the download? It's just used for the download. So after you have it downloaded, you can delete that if you want. All right. And Sean Lilly asked a great question. She says, is there any special way to shut down the virtual machine? So there's kind of two options. You can actually shut it down if you want. And I don't know if I recommend that, and I'll tell you why. So right now, you can see up here at the top that I'm actually using 28% of my RAM, and the bulk of it's from this virtual machine. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to have it save the state, and that just like closing the lid on your laptop. So by default, VMware will save your state. So I'm just actually click this little X and then say yes, and it will save the virtual machine state, close, and we're all good. Next time I go to open it, it'll be right where I left off. You'll see that it restores the virtual machine state, and we are right back to where we left off. All the windows are still open, files where we were at. So you can do that, and it'll actually, so if I close this, you'll actually see my RAM dip down to probably like 15%, 14%, something like that. Yeah. So when you do that, it's not using your computer anymore, but it also makes for quick startups. But on those same lines, if there are times where if you're in this weird place, because sometimes you actually can put your database in this never-ending loop, and it kind of crashes. So if that ever happens, I'll tell you, hey, you need to hard reset your machine. And if you need to do that, suspending it won't actually shut it down. So you actually have to go to virtual machine power and power off guest. And that will actually power it off, shut it down. So if I ever have you actually hard power cycle your machine, make sure you're not just suspending it, because it will load the same problem up, because that's how it was saved. All right, and then someone else asked, are we using a demo of VMware? Will we lose everything once we gain full access through on the hub? No, once you get your key, it just upgrades your install on it. Yeah, you won't lose anything, so no worries there. I'm having issues unzipping the Fedora download. Any tips on that? Are you on Mac or PC, or Mac or Windows, I guess I should say? It should unzip. The only thing I can think that might be a problem is if the file was corrupt, which is what I'm guessing. It's actually, if you download through the browser or SFTP, it's actually pretty common that the data gets corrupted, which is one reason why I like the torrent. So if you, so my guess is that the download's corrupt, or you're out of space on your machine. Most likely the file's corrupt, which really stinks because it's a big download. But the torrent file will actually check it with a hash. So it will actually mathematically check and make sure every file's there and ready. So if you want to use if you're worried about it, you want to just do it right the first time, go ahead and use that torrent file. And you can find that torrent file and instructions if you go to db.tannercook.com and then go to CIT225, and I think it's here. Yeah, so click on CIT225 Oracle, and then over on the right under Posts, click on the CIT225 Fedora instance torrent, and it will have a link to that file. And also a link to transmission, which is what I like to use to torrent. And if you want, feel free to keep seeding that. The more people that are downloading it at the same time, the faster the download will go. If you're not familiar with torrents, they're actually pretty neat. So if you want to help someone out, and so far it hasn't been an issue, but usually I have some students, some people that are in South America, Africa, some of those places where, either internet, I had one student where he could only use the internet from this time to this time. And so it was really helpful to him because he would actually go download, like 25% of it. And with the torrent, he could stop it, leave, come back the next day. And instead of starting, it was actually the only way he could get it downloaded. So if you want to help someone out, and you feel free to seed that torrent file if you see someone's downloading. So good questions. Let's see. I think I got all the questions. Any other questions before we end the recording? And these are great questions. I'm glad you guys are asking them, because odds are there's lots of people that are going to end up watching this, and it's going to answer their question too. All right. Looks like that's it for questions. If you have any questions come up, feel free to throw them in the Teams. I watch it like a hawk, especially these first few weeks, because I just want to make sure everyone's up and going. So if anything comes up, shoot it in Teams. Otherwise, stick around if you need any additional help. But thanks for being here. You guys it makes a huge difference when there's actually people here. As you can see, there's been lots of conversation that really helps flesh out, what I forget as I'm rambling on. So thank you for being here. I hope you guys can make it future weeks as well. And good luck this week.